Good morning, everyone. Let's try one more time. Good morning, everyone. There we go. We have a full house. The Durham County Commissioners and Durham Public Schools Board of Education quarterly meeting is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning. The interpreters for our meeting today are valued members of the DPS Multilingual Resource Center. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. The next item on our agenda is agenda review and approval.
Move approval of the agenda
I'll
as
second.
presented.
Been moved by Ms. Byer and seconded by Mr. Lee that we approve the agenda as presented. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is the approval of meeting minutes from November 19th, 2025.
Move approval of the meeting minutes from November 19th, 2025.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Ms. Harold Goff and seconded by Dr. Lee, that we approve the minutes from November 19th, 2025. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, use the same sign. Passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda, we're going to get into the meat of our meeting. We have capital improvement planning process. We have a presentation from DPS, and then we'll transition to the county. Dr. Lewis, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chair Umstead. Good morning, everybody. We are here to share with you an update on our capital improvement planning process. Team has been meeting for quite some time and came up with some thoughts, some ideas. Drafted this form to share. No decisions have been made. Final. No decisions have been made, but given the data that they received and the brainstorming and the thoughts that they came up with, wanted to just kind of share an update. This is just an update of where we are and some of the things that they learned during that process. But there'll definitely be more to come after this. Again, I'll reiterate, no decision has been made. These are just thoughts and ideas at this point. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Ken Barnes.
Good morning, board members, county commissioners. I'm Kenneth Barnes, the Chief Operating Officer for DPS. Today we have a brief first draft presentation of our 26 CIP update. Our community is rapidly changing, so our school system is as well. So please keep that in mind as we look through the information that Devin Mitchell is going to present today. All right, thank you.
Good morning, board members. Good morning, Dr. Lewis. Thank you for having me. We're here to share some ideas, some thoughts based on all of the input we've received for our capital improvement plan for 2026. As mentioned, this is a draft. It does come with a tremendous amount of thought and a tremendous amount of input. So we'll share with you some ideas and thinking surrounding the improvement plan. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do is start with just the assessment, just a general overview of where we've been, what's brought us to this point, talk about some of the objectives that we set out for in our task force and where we landed with those. Also want to talk to you about increment 1 of the capital improvement plan. What are the ideas that are on the table? And how have we arrived at those as being priorities for the district? And then finally, talk about timeline and the report and where we are at this moment and where we're headed. Next slide. All right, so back in September and October, we convened a task force for the capital improvement plan. That task force met in multiple sessions to take a look at every property, every school, every support facility within the district, and to make some determinations about those facilities, where they are in terms of health and what we think the trajectory is for each of those. After that point, from November through December, we went through a second round of vetting. That round of vetting included validating information that we received from the task force, and we did that in multiple ways. We engaged members from our maintenance and operations team, wanting to make sure that things that land on their top priority list were things that were also landing on the task force priority list. We also met with planning. So within our planning department group, we talked about enrollment. We talked about areas of the district where we have overcrowding, areas where we're underserved. We also talked about what the long-range trajectory looks like for the next 10 years, factored that into what we think about when we think about the plan. We also have consulted with a number of financial experts, right? Both in the construction industry as well as architecture teams to talk about what is a digestible plan for the district. How much could we do as a district at one time in terms of construction or maintenance and repair projects, as well as what is the actual construction climate out there today? What do our projects cost? What does it look like? And so we've looked through a variety of lenses to arrive at where we are today in this process. And as I mentioned, it has been very thoughtfully crafted. Next slide. So in the task force, we talked about a number of thoughts and ideas. We looked comprehensively at issues within our schools, issues with surrounding size of schools, surrounding boundaries for our schools. And we arrived at a number of objectives, a number of priorities that we're thinking about when we think about all of our facilities. The first one, of course, is being aligned with our strategic plan goals, 5A and 5C. The strong need to address failing systems and infrastructure within the district. This is an ongoing issue for us, dealing with failing systems. Rebuilding significantly aging facilities. So when we met as a task force, we talked about facilities that are 50, 60, 75 years old that have been upgraded 4 or 5 times that are still failing, and the need to begin to refresh assets that the cost to repair versus cost to replace doesn't make good financial sense. We talked about prioritizing safety and resilience. This is something that certainly came out of our discussions within our community when we went through our educational adequacy discussions. There are a number of things related to safety that we want to make sure get folded into our plan. Next was right-sizing district schools. So we have a number of schools within the district that are small schools, and I'll talk about that in a few moments, but trying to begin to right-size our portfolio. Resolving long-term overcrowding. So we do have areas of the district that are experiencing growth. We do have schools in the district that have been overcrowded for some time. So adding those schools into our plan and thinking about what we want to do to make adjustments for those schools. Preparing for changes in enrollment. I'll talk about enrollment projections in a moment. Ensuring equity-minded investments. So as you know, we've been on a campaign to upgrade and refresh schools for some time. As a result of that, we have some disparity amongst schools. We have some schools that are new and fresh with amenities and specialty program spaces, and then we have older schools that haven't been touched. And so bringing all schools up at the same time is important. Prioritizing schools that maybe haven't been touched is important, so that we're all getting equal access to the same kinds of resources in our schools. And then finally, resolving closed school sites and potential consolidation sites, starting to make some determination about those and trying to make plans for those within the asset group. Next slide. And then just a reminder here on our strategic plan, goal 5A, by 2028, DPS will provide healthy, safe, and technologically current and environmentally conscious facilities for 100% of DPS properties. This is a goal that we are actively working on, and there are a number of steps we need to take when we think about our schools to achieve this. And then goal 5C, by 2028, DPS will increase K-12 student enrollment to achieve 100% of utilization of seat capacity at all school levels. So just a reminder of those, that those are part of our North Star here on the project. Next slide. All right, so many of you should be familiar with this, but just as a refresher, our task force, as we went through each and every facility was given a classification when we reviewed it. A school or a support facility was deemed a maintenance and repair project, which would be just a fix what is broken type construction project. We looked at facility modernizations and comprehensive modernizations. Those include fixing what is broken and upgrades within a school or additions to a school. We also had a category for new construction. So historically, we might have thought of new construction as something where the district is growing and we need to add a new school. But it also includes schools that are aging out, where it doesn't make good sense financially to keep investing. So new construction is on the table for those projects as well. No work. We do have some projects, some schools in the district that don't require work at this time. So that was a category. And then if we want to close any sites, consolidate any sites, or sell any sites, there's a category for that as well. Next slide. All right, so just a reminder about the current state of our facilities, the overall maintenance and health of our facilities currently. 36.5% of facilities are in significantly poor or critical condition. You can see those on the 2 red bars. We have to think very carefully about maintenance and repair projects. Many of our projects include things like replacing mechanical systems, replacing things that sit above the ceiling, things that sit on the roof, dealing with waterproofing. Sometimes there is complexity involved in how we phase construction. So just because we're replacing units on a roof, if we're also need to replace roofing, that needs to happen at the same time. So just simply handling maintenance and repair, it does involve multiple disciplines, and it does involve some complexity usually. So thinking about how to fold in and have these modernization projects going side by side with our maintenance repair projects is a very important component. Next slide. All right, so taking a look at these 2 graphs. The graph on the left is facility investment classification chart. So as I was just explaining, we had a number of categories that the task force could choose from for a school. And on the left, what you're seeing is the result of that. So all facilities having been assessed, we have 35% of our facilities were chosen for maintenance and repair. About 15% of our facilities were chosen for either facility modernizations, new construction, or no work, 15% each. And then we also have a small percentage for either consolidation or closure, and that's at 7%. And I'm going to talk a little bit about facility closure and what that might look like in a moment. The graph on the right shows maintenance and repair only. So in multiple of our past sessions, we've talked about the cost for maintenance and repair currently in the district. Previously, we've spoken about a number around $965 million just to do maintenance and repair. That does not even include a coat of paint. That is simply taking care of what's broken. That number, we have been having an external cost estimating team doing some additional review of our numbers. That number is probably higher. I don't have the total number at this moment, but we certainly are in that range. Of that, 56% needs to happen within the first 5 years of our plan. These are things that are failing, have failed, or are in significantly poor condition. Next slide. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but just to give you an idea about kind of the scoping of things, this is maintenance and repairs required just for MEP on our top 10 projects. We have very significant needs related to MEP. We have already earmarked our money and are submitting for the last of our ARPA funds now. We also are targeting the lottery funds and the capital funds that are still available to us to spend on maintenance and repairs, but the needs are quite deep and quite extensive. So we want to be very thoughtful about when and how a maintenance and repair happens and how it gets phased within the larger structure of a project. Next slide. All right, I also wanted to just talk about enrollment for a moment. So the line with the blue dots, that is our enrollment projection district-wide looking forward. So what you see is generally flat with an anticipated steady or small loss until around 2035. So we know that birth rates have declined, the voucher program was initiated, and we've seen a flattening of our projections for the future. And while growth may flatten, we still, what that really says is that we don't have a need for new schools, but we certainly have a need to continue to invest in our portfolio and to continue to bring all of our schools up to modern learning standards that meet with our guidelines. All right, next slide. So here's just a general outline of the projects that we're thinking about in the 10-year outlay. This includes some changes in the complexion of our facilities to be more nimble for a time of reduced enrollment. It also is an excellent time for us to reinvest in our portfolio because we do not have to spend as much of our focus on new schools. We have an excellent opportunity to work on the schools where we have significant needs. So this is an excellent opportunity for us from a facilities point of view to look at getting our schools adequately sized and to also work on upgrades related to repair work. Next slide. So let me just talk for a moment about small schools. So in 1992, we had the city and county schools merge. As part of that, we inherited many small schools in our district. And let me explain what a small school is. A small school, an elementary school, which is what I'm talking about today, is a school that would have less than 450 students. And generally, these schools sit on sites that are less than 10 acres. So they become difficult to enlarge or expand on such a small footprint. The Department of Public Instruction has a minimum elementary school site of 10 acres. So many of these schools don't qualify for an adequately sized school site. What it does not mean is that these schools aren't adequately enrolled. Many of them are fully enrolled. They just happen to be small schools. But it becomes very difficult when you talk about things like consolidation, which is something we hear commonly across the United States. And when you consolidate, it's not as simple for us to simply move some students from a school into another school that absorbs them and we close the school. And the reason why is because throughout all parts of our district, we have schools that have less than 450 students, and we don't have great places to simply move them to another school. So the thoughtful anticipation of how we would address anything related to consolidation involves more than one step in order to achieve that. So when you look at this chart, I've identified 2 school projects that could fall in increment 1 of our capital improvement plan. The rest of these, we're calling them on a watch list. And I believe we have around 16 schools here that fall into the small school category. The watch list is really to continue to watch enrollment, to continue to assess and evaluate the health of the schools, and to make a determination about them at a later date. We certainly could not consolidate and trade up schools and do that universally as one project because we have such great maintenance and repair needs as a district. But we could certainly begin to take incremental steps to change our portfolio, to be more efficient, to offer new kinds of resources, to put these schools in line with a 700 to 800 student school, which is our district standard, and to give them the amenities that those schools have. So there's a number of efficiencies and benefits from using this as an approach to part of our plan. Next slide. So let's talk about the ones that have been earmarked as possibilities for increment 1. The first on the top is Club Elementary School with George Watts Elementary School. These schools are located 1.5 miles apart. If you look at all 4 of the schools, you'll see there's a red tag on the side of those. That's the Facility Condition Index. That tells you the health of the school, and on some level tells you something about the level of investment that has to be made to the school in terms of improvements. These schools are very high on the list in terms of having significant maintenance and repair needs. Both of these schools are 75 plus years old. They've had 4 to 5 modernization and improvements, and they still continue to be in poor shape in terms of maintenance and repairs. Some possibilities for these two schools would be to combine the student populations from both schools. And because this is in the central region and we have a wonderful asset of the Durham School of the Arts site, this is a project that could potentially move to the Durham School of the Arts site and be a great close location where you could join these two school populations. The second opportunity is on the bottom. That is Y.E. Smith Elementary with Eastway Elementary School. These schools are about a mile apart. Eastway is one of these schools on the list that happens to have good acreage. It has 14.5 acres. And we could bring the Y.E. Smith Elementary School students to the Eastway school site. This would, however, require an expansion to Eastway in order to accommodate the student population and to bring the adequate resources for a school that would hold 700 to 800 students. Next slide. We also looked at key investments where we could consolidate in terms of our central services and support facilities. One area that is a possibility that we're considering is the combining of the Fuller Building and the Staff Development Center. Both of these projects have poor performance in terms of maintenance and repair needs. There is the added possibility that you could combine the Bacon Street facility as part of a consolidation of our central services. This would certainly provide the district with better co-location of staff, better opportunities for collaboration. It would certainly help with inefficiency in terms of time traveling between facilities and providing an overall consolidation of many of our central service facilities. This consolidation could take on a couple different aspects. One would be that we could consolidate all and have a long-term lease on a commercial office building. Another option would be to modernize part of our Durham School of the Arts site and move this portion of our central services to that site as a new location. So those are items on the table for possible consolidation as well. And then on the next slide, other types of investments that we're thinking about. So in terms of maintenance and repair, we have one school, Bethesda Elementary. We have 2 facility modernizations, one at Southern High School and one at Little River, 2 comprehensive modernizations, one at Githens Middle School and one at Eastway Elementary School, Eastway being the potential site for consolidation, so it would be growing. And then new construction. Jordan High School is on our list for significant maintenance and repair needs, consistent overcrowding and portables at that school, and the need to build new, as well as a possible new school for our DSA site. Next slide. In terms of current sites that we have closed, we have the old Lowe's Grove site. Our current status on that is that we have just begun the feasibility study for that site. Old Northern High School, we have an appraisal underway for that site with thoughts on the table to either demolish and sell or to retain the gym and the athletics facilities and look at other types of joint use opportunities for that site. We may also conduct a feasibility study for that site as well. And then also Durham School of the Arts, which I've mentioned, we have an appraisal underway for that site right now. Next slide. All right, in terms of timeline, you're seeing here, because we have given every facility a classification, you're seeing an overall rollout for all facilities, but we have 5 increments. The first 2 increments, increment 1, we would anticipate in 2 phases. So this would be 2 groups of 4 projects each. 4 projects depending on scope, but in terms of what DPS can handle at any one given time, as well as what the general construction climate could handle at any time, for projects seems to be a good place. And then you're seeing a dashed line there, right through the yellow arrow. That is our 10-year mark. So while we've called out 12 possible projects running over the next 10 to 12 years, we do want to, at the 10-year mark, reconvene and relook at our capital improvement plan. That is certainly an industry standard. We want to make sure that we reassess, refresh, look again at our enrollment, review our portfolio again at the 10-year mark. So really looking at that first outlay as our increment that we're thinking about now. Next slide. Okay, in terms of the report, the area that you're seeing in the black box, that's where we are now. We've completed phase 1 and phase 2. So we're wrapping up the report now. We'll be complete in April. There will still be some collaboration happening in April to make that happen. We also still have our cost estimating underway, so we'll be prepared in April to come back and actually talk about what some of these things cost and actually talk about where we've landed with final decisions for what will be included in the increment. And then that sets us up well for collaboration with the county and the school district from May to October, giving about 6 months for us to retool in any way that we need to make sure that we're lining up with the plan and the goals of the county. And that may require some work to make sure that we're aligned and to make sure we have the right projects that line up with funding. So that's the current status. And then the next slide is just a potential rollout of how we would see an increment 1. So looking at beyond voting, priority 1 funding available perhaps in March of 2027. That would give us a chance to get ahead of any work that we need to do with consultants or to do any additional studies before we roll out a project, excuse me. And then design selection in Q3 or Q4 of 2027. And then the beginning of design and permitting March of 2029 with a midpoint of construction of March of 2030. So there is certainly some time ahead to actually realize these items, but just so you understand the amount of time that it takes to actually get our projects launched. So with that, I think that's the end of my deck. So I'll open it up to any questions, comments, thoughts from the team.
Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to ask you to hold on. We're going to have the county do their presentation and then we'll circle back
Great.
to questions.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have the county come on up.
Good morning. Keith and I will share highlights on our capital planning process. We did give an update to our Board of Commissioners, guess at the last meeting. And we didn't talk as much about the numbers and projects, but process because of the complexities of how this season is right now. For an example, last night we had an item that we took to the board. I guess the week before, it was quoted a number because of the supply chain issues and conflicts now happening in the Middle East. The aluminum price went up significantly, and we had to quickly close that contract deal. Right now, pricing and cost are in places we've not seen before. So we're moving cautiously in how we think about planning, but we also know there are pressures with aging systems, aging infrastructure, and the need to address enrollment for various reasons, because although it may not be growing, we have a lot of facilities that were just shown not only at the schools, but also at the county supported school programming that need repair. tricky timing, but we will figure a path forward. So Keith will walk through the slides and share the framework. And one of the things that I will say is that we have always partnered with all of our partners that are out there, whether it's Durham Public Schools, the community college, museum of life and science, those that we have supported in a larger way in our capital improvement plan. And this is a season that we'll have to walk together, knowing we're going to get across the finish line, but the timing may fluctuate based upon our ability to pay and what the market looks like right now with supply chain issues. So Keith.
Thank you, Manager Hager. Good morning to all the elected officials sitting at the board, Superintendent Lewis, chairs, and other folks. Lovely to see you all. It feels like I was just here a couple of days ago. Can we get to the next slide, please? So we're going to kind of go over briefly the county's CIP process overview, sort of the steps involved with our capital planning. And then we'll end up with some key upcoming dates where we're moving forward, and then look forward to having some discussion and answering questions. Next slide, please. This is hard on my eyes to see. Let's see here. Our capital planning essential, I had to look at the big screen here. It's a multi-year plan. We look out 10 years, not unlike what Devin just pointed out for the Board of Education and DPS. We have to prioritize by importance, projects by the level of importance, essentially how essential they are to the county. Like our detention center is not something you can just ignore. That's a 30-year-old building. That's actually not a capital project, but it's a wonderful example of sort of the level of essentiality that we might have to choose from versus other projects that we have in mind. And then the long-term need across the county. Ultimately, a CIP is a document and a plan put in place so you don't have surprises. So what do I mean by surprises? You don't have something pop up that, oh, I need to find $100 million tomorrow. You see it coming and you plan accordingly. So ultimately, after all of that, there's a strong emphasis at the county level in general of the timing of improvements. We cannot do everything in the first 3 years, even though we have identified many, many needs that need to happen now. We just can't chew that much food at any given time, to use a metaphor. But after that, we have to blend the type of funding sources that we have. We have to figure out how we're going to pay for particular projects and what type of funding we're going to use to pay for them. You all, at the Board of Education, are used to general obligation bond referendums where we go out to voters and we ask for their approval to issue a type of long-term debt instrument. GO bonds generally have the lowest interest rates of any choice we can make because voters have said in their approval of GO bonds that you are allowed, county, to raise the tax rate no matter what happens high enough to pay the debt first. So before anything else happens, if we were to have some sort of catastrophic event in the county, we would still have to pay the debt on those GO bonds first before we spent money on everything else. That kind of gives comfort to people who buy these bonds, which means we get lower interest rates. But there are other long-term debt instruments we have. LOBS, which is sort of a long-term debt instrument, 20-year payback schedule, but you don't have to go to the citizens to ask for that funding. But to get that funding, the trade-off is you have a little higher interest rate. Then there are other types of funding, bank financings, pay-go money, where we just pay cash in support of certain things. So we have to blend all of those financial instruments we have and balance them out to try to keep our AAA bond rating, to meet some financial statistics that bond agencies and people who we lend to like to see. Are we overextended? Are we under? Can we pay for it? We have a financial advisor we use to do that, but all that blending has to take place along with timing of projects and essentiality of projects and what projects need to happen first or the most important. So after that, we have to separate our operating and capital resources in a large CIP like this, because every project we take on also has additional annual operating costs. We carry an operating budget now that's $800 million. If you include all funds, we just passed $1 billion for the first time as a county budget in 25-26. But we also pay inside that budget annually upwards of $100 million in annual debt service. I don't remember the number exactly, but it's significant, of which DPS-related debt service we pay on things that you've already done or in the process of doing is around $60 or $70 million a year. Here's a little factoid you might want to remember. For every $100 million in debt that we issue, the county has to pay roughly $10 to $11 million a year for the next 20 years to pay that off. So you can think of it, every $100 million is $10 million plus a year we have to pay. So our Devon say $965 million in viewed or assessed operating costs. That's not even building new buildings. So what would that be? That would be $96 million in new funding the county would have to find every year. What's 1 cent on the property tax rate is $8.8 million. So you're talking an 11-cent tax rate increase just to deal with those types of numbers. That may not be financially feasible. It may not be politically feasible, but those are the numbers we're talking about and we have to consider. Can we go to the next slide, please? So with all of those issues in place, we start every 2 years when we update our CIP in general. We try to start with a facility needs assessment or a refresh of that, where our engineering department goes out and talks with a contracted company and they go assess the needs. How many EMS stations do we need? What's our population growth? What are some of the key areas of growth? If we need an adjacent detention center somewhere else in the county, and then we include talking with Devon, DPS, and other things like that. Then we start the process of project prioritization and sequencing, which is just that same thing. What's essential? What needs to happen now? What can we put off a couple of years? Then we take all of that information from where projects are located over a 10-year scan, and then we try to say, how much is it going to cost us to do the projects as we have it estimated there? We look at that financial cost, and then we evaluate the affordability. Oh, that may mean a 5-cent tax rate increase in 1 year, or it may mean a 10-cent tax rate increase, and that may not be acceptable. So we we move projects around a little bit more to try to mitigate pressure on affordability issues. And then ultimately, we bring that updated CIP to our Board of County Commissioners for them to review and update and assess and then ultimately approve. Next slide, please. So where are we in the capital project plan development process? Well, there's 4 phases to this. There's project request and project prioritization. Phase 2 is complete the cash flow projections. I would say right now, Manager Hager, we are in the middle of phase 1 and phase 2, more in the phase 2 area right now. We're going to, once we get that flattened out, we will then we'll move to phase 3, where we take our CIP and, more importantly, our financial plan on how to pay for our CIP. We'll take it to a financial consultant. You all have heard and seen Doug Carter. He's come to this podium any number of times, and we still work with him. He's a fine person to work with. And he will, at Doug Carter Associates, an expert at the financial side of this, assess our viability. How viable is this plan that we have while also keeping our AAA bond rating, which is a foundational issue and concern that we have with every CIP update we have. After he sort of okays it and talks with our commissioners, then hopefully we'll approve a CIP in phase 4. Next slide, please. This is too small for me to see, but Manager Hager asked for this from our engineering department. This is a list that our department, our engineering and project management department, uses, what we call shovel-ready projects. An issue we have with every major project we have is the timing that's estimated to to complete the project and the actuality of how long it takes to do that. So we have created a process through this form where we go through and say, how close to shovel ready is this project ready to go? Have you done all I forget all the technical terms, but there's all sorts of testing you have to do and approvals you have to get and architectural designs, and those often can take 18 months, I think, Manager Hager, we've discussed.
And this is part of the reason we included this, and we do have the handout in normal size in your attachment. so that everyone can understand the rigor that we go through before we say, this is a project, we can include this as something that we move forward as a part of our GEO bond group of projects, or for a limited obligation bond. One of the things that we go through for the financing is a review with the local government commission. And they ask for lots of information prior to you moving forward with your debt financing. And because of lessons learned, we have put more emphasis on our shovel readiness, because for the county side, we've had projects, we've moved forward, and we didn't quite have some components as synced up, and you get through the project and you don't have enough money. So where do you find the money from? We have those same similar issues that have occurred with some of our DPS projects. And so if it's bond supported, that means the county has to figure out, well, how do we close that gap? And there are only a few ways we do that. And of course, as the partner, you can look within your dollars that are there. When there's not enough, we then have to figure out together, well, how do we close that gap? So trying to do projects that are shovel ready is important. We had great examples with the 2 elementary schools last year with the bond program, whereas 18 months out, we had allocated funds for programming for design work. And when the bond was passed, immediately construction happened. It was seamless. It was just a perfect example of shovel readiness, because we made the dollars available prior to the bond dollars, the GEO bond dollars, and we were able to move quickly. So that's an ideal situation. We know sometimes it may not happen as seamlessly as that, but on the back end, when that is not vetted to the extent that you would anticipate, you can run into some shortfalls budget-wise, because it wasn't fleshed out as much. And not because of market conditions or supply chain issues, but because the planning on the front end just had not moved along enough. So we can go to the next slide.
The ultimate end effect of not being shovel ready is that if it takes any amount of time, with prices increasing monthly, quarterly, annually, we find that the county, we've had our county departments on county projects as well as some DPS projects come back and go, oh, there's additional funding that we need. And that's no small amount of money. It's not an additional 2 million. It's usually in the 20, 30, 40, $50 million range. And again, getting back to a CIP, those types of dollar amounts are not ones that we enjoy being surprised by, because it's really hard to adjust to those types of increases. Next steps, phase 2 and 3 highlights, March through July of this year. We will continue the project list review, which management and my office is doing right now. And then in March 26th, we will assess the shovel readiness. We will turn around and ask DPS on their phase 1, I forget the term you used, but the phase 1, 4 projects plus, and how close you are to ready of that. And then in April 26th, we will talk about, if a general obligation bond is recommended, then market assessment is going to occur to gauge public support. But I do want to also note that we don't necessarily have to have a general obligation bond referendum. Depending on the amount of money that we can afford to take on, depending on the projects identified across the county, including DPS, we have options. It doesn't always have to be a general obligation bond referendum. So that's the timeline. Next slide, please. This is a little small. Hopefully you can see it better on your computers or a piece of paper. This just shows you the growth in the amount of debt, that top graph that the county is taking on over key years. If you look at the top set of numbers, I believe in 2026, it talks about related debt service costs to our CIP is $131 million. And I think by 2030, that number grows to $188 million. So that's another $50+ million annually that the county is expected to take on in the next 4 years. And I can tell you that our revenue growth, our natural revenue growth, is not increasing enough to take care of an additional $50 million in debt service or capital improvement plan related dollars. without a tax rate increase. So there's a tax rate increase built into those numbers. And part of that is fully paying for 2022 GO bond referendum dollars that need to happen, plus additional projects that we are already pacing that we see out in the future. It does not necessarily include $965 million in operating. So it would make that $188 million annual payment go up even higher. These are the type of financial issues that we have to face. The bottom part of this graph, or the second one below, just shows the funding sources we use to pay for our debt service. And really, there's only two major ones. There's property tax and there's sales tax. And all I'm showing you in that red circle in the bottom is that more and more of our capital improvement plan is put on funding by our property tax. What does that translate into? It means that a higher property tax rate is going to be needed to pay for debt service. That's just one side of the equation, because we've got to talk about the annual budget as well, and that's also paid for with property tax. So there are limitations financially, politically, and reasonably for citizens about how much we can raise the property tax rate in any given year or over a couple of years to support this funding for a capital improvement plan as well as the annual budget. Next slide, please. Some important reminders, say it again, a balanced, affordable CIP is something that we hope that supports political desires and definitely reinforces AAA debt designation or AAA bond designation. Try to limit the property tax rate increase as much as possible, or at least balance it out. You have slow growth. What we try to avoid is to have a massive tax rate increase in 1 year of 10 cents or 5 cents or 7 cents. So we try to balance it out, and that limits the amount of projects you can put in any 1 year. Once a recommended CIP is finalized, it will be vetted by our financial consultants to ensure the county's financial capability and stewardship through bond ratings, while also keeping a close eye on regional economic political factors. They may influence the willingness to pay. So we can plan it out and hope for the best, but we have to be conservative and look out in the future, the environment, the economic environment, which honestly doesn't look particularly great, at least as compared looking backwards over the last decade of Durham County growth. The next decade is a little more fuzzy, a little more chaotic. So once the CIP passes, there'll be a stringent financial vetting process. Once it passes that stringent financial vetting process, it's going to be sent to the board for more intensive discussion. It should be noted that we have lost some occupancy tax revenue that we had by board policy put towards the CIP support, debt service support, but we did that in hopes of a long-term gain. We have moved that occupancy tax over to the Sports Commission because we're trying to find new revenue sources that will support us in the next 20, 30, 50 years. And one way we can do that is to attract other people to come in to the county and pay sales tax for services used at ball fields and all sorts of different sports-related issues. That's what that occupancy tax revenue is hopefully going forward in the future. But the direct effect of it is a loss of support for the capital improvement plan, which again just puts more pressure on the property tax revenue to fill in that difference. Next slide, please. Key upcoming dates, I think we talked about this, March through July, continue capital project evaluation and evaluate the shovel readiness of projects. March 10th, we will have a CIP overview at this meeting right here, which we are doing right now. April 6th, we will have a board work session where we talk about more in detail, and you get fantastic graphs and numbers about the financing update related to the CIP. Next slide. Questions? Concerns?
I'm sure we've got all of the above. I'm gonna have Ms. Mitchell, if you can come back up to the podium. So we have questions for both of you all at this time. Board members, commissioners, questions? Commissioner Burton.
Thank you, Chair Umstead. I think the question that I had, and I guess it's going to be in the reports, when you were talking about the consolidation with regards to like Y.E. Smith Club and George Watts, I imagine you're going to put in that report what would happen to those buildings, things like of that nature, because I know the community would be very interested in what those facilities, what would occur with those facilities and how they would be used and things of that nature. So.
Yes, I would agree that would happen. Right now, we're still in the determination phase if we'll be selecting those projects. They were selected because they are the with the strongest need. That's how they landed at the top of those consolidation projects. But yes, we will absolutely be considering what happens with those sites.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you. I do have a number of questions. First of all, I appreciate having this joint meeting and I appreciate all the work that is happening. I just want to preface some of my questions and comments with the fact that we are really in unprecedented times for many reasons. Not just the financial constraints that we're under, you know, with locally, but also with impacts from the state, the federal government, but also looking at the enrollment trends for Durham Public Schools and the number of charter schools we have now, vouchers, and knowing that we know policies that are happening at the state level that we don't have control over. So we have to deal with what we have. And I think that for me, there is a particular urgency related to enrollment, and I understand that some of this planning is kind of in the future related to consolidation and what the, you know, what is being proposed. And for me, what comes to mind is, does there need to be any interim steps? Because we're just going to be facing certain financial realities that we have to deal with. And so I guess one of my questions is, are there even the possibility of interim steps related to the issue of consolidation of schools? I would like to understand better around the enrollment with, you know, elementary, middle, and high school, what that really looks like. I know the numbers that you show, I assume those were capacity, but understanding like what is the current enrollment now? Do you see the possibility of even looking at things that can be done more quickly as on an interim level, knowing that it's going to take time to possibly add on to a facility or build a new facility? Just wondering about that. That's my first question.
So we do have some complexities in our schools in that we don't have great places to move 300 students. So moving a group of students and closing a school to, in the interim, alleviate some of our overhead and expenses is not easily doable. I think if you were going to look at an interim, you know, some other interim type solution, and I was trying to think while you were speaking, I think that's something where you would be having to take a school population and move a portion of them to one place and a portion of them to another. That is not something we have looked at this point as an interim solution. It could be something that's on the table, but that's the only thing that really comes to mind for me that maybe we haven't studied. And I'm not sure, we would have to have some discussions around if that's, you know, in the best interest of our schools, and if that, you know, how that works in terms of, you know, moving partial groups of students, you know, with the impacts of that, I think would be very important for us to think about.
Well, I would say that I think it is something that we do have to look at based on just the economic realities that we're
Mhm.
facing. And I think really everything has to be on the table.
Mhm.
So I just want to put that out there. I also would like to know how you are currently working with the planning department on, you know, we see what's going on with, I mean, enrollment trends. We're down at what we were 25 years ago. I don't know. And, you know, we know that our population is aging, birth rates, the impact again of other types of schools in Durham, but also just looking at where residential developments have been approved. And also hopefully will be soon adopting our new LDO, land development ordinance, but that will also help us understand that where we're going to be expecting future development and growth. I'm just wondering how that is also, because I didn't hear you talk about that.
So we have given separate presentations on enrollment. We do look at where we see housing and the types of housing. All of that gets factored into our enrollment projections. The areas of the district where we do see change is in the southwest. We see continued growth in the southwest portion of the district and some in the southeast east area. So those are the areas that we, are watching. But right now, our projections take into account the knowledge that we have today on what's out there in terms of construction that is planned or permitted. It's very hard to track, things that are planned that may or may not happen in the future. But we always, collaborate on getting that data from the county and from the city and making sure that that's included in the forecasting.
And I'm also wondering about the impact of growing together on the realities of, the facilities and again, the costs. I also wonder about even the cost of implementing the Growing Together plan. And again, I mean, that's also just kind of a bigger discussion about funding and budget. Again, these are very difficult conversations, but I have to raise them because, the past 2 years, there have been about a 13% tax increase on our residents. That is not sustainable. And we see that the impact that the reval has had on people being able to afford to pay their taxes, stay in their homes, all the other economic pressures we have. And so, again, this really means we have to take a hard look at things. We see what's happening at the state level with these committees because of obviously complaints that are happening. So these are really hard things that I'm bringing up, but we have to talk about them. So I'm just wondering about the cost of implementing that.
What I can tell you about Growing Together is that we do have a working group that meets monthly to go over impacts related to enrollment and specifically related to the rollout of Growing Together. One of the tools in our toolbox is boundary adjustments. So boundary adjustments are on the table for the future to adjust areas where we have growth issues or where we need to balance out student populations as a result of Growing Together. So that is an item that remains in flux and something that we're, beginning that evaluation process of. So that's, certainly one thing that we can engage with. I can't speak directly to the costs of Growing Together. I wasn't here at the implementation of that to be able to speak to that, but I can speak to, the results of it, which we're currently continuing to monitor, and I'm sure we will see some adjustments in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of when you were presenting around plans for different properties, I just want to emphasize one of the assets that Durham Public Schools does have is that you have very valuable properties in different locations. And even, if it comes to closing some of the small schools, a lot of them are located in downtown, in places where there's a lot of redevelopment potential. I think that's a positive thing. And what's happening with Lowe's Grove and working with the Development Finance Institute and looking at public-private partnerships, I think, again, this is a bright spot, especially looking at, Northern High School and DSA. I want to make sure, because I see, there was mention of appraisal, demolishing, that I hope that everyone will stay open to, again, looking at some other, again, the model with Lowe's Grove with those properties. Because also the idea of housing for teachers, the Teach House model, for DPS staff, a way to leverage some of those properties to meet other needs. that Durham Public Schools has, the issue of teacher retention, especially with new and early educators, that we just keep a comprehensive look at all the challenges that we're dealing with, and how we can use the assets that Durham Public Schools has to meet some of those needs. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs. Dr. Lewis, can I have you speak to what the board has asked for you to do with those other two properties? Old Northern as well as Durham School of the Arts.
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar to the work that Devin Mitchell mentioned in terms of what we're doing in terms of a feasibility study with Old Lowe's Grove. Thanks to our partners at the county, we have engaged with the UNC School of Government. They will also be doing a feasibility study of Old Northern and what will become Old DSA. And so they are working, and then we had some conversations a couple of weeks ago. So they will be doing this similar work that they're doing with Old Lowe's Grove with Old Northern and what will become Old DSA as
Oh,
well. So a lot of community engagement around that.
That's great news.
I do think we should update our slides to make sure it reflects that, because it might feel conflicting if I'm watching in the community thinking that we're planning to demolish or do something different in there. So I think we should make sure we update those slides so that we have that information correct. I'm going to go over to Ms. Byer. I want to be mindful of time because we have presentations on the budget coming after this.
Ms. Mitchell, I want to lift up your leadership on this really complicated work and thank you for all that you've done. I want to thank Commissioner Burton and Ms. Harold Goff and Mr. Tabb, who served on this task force as we wrestled with this impossible, wicked problem. I think we understand the financial pressure that the county is under. It is not, we don't see hope coming from the state on behalf of our facilities or our folks. We're so appreciative that Governor Stein, released a critical needs budget kind of conversation yesterday, but we know we are putting pressure on you for our people and our facilities. And I think as a collective, these boards, we need to wrestle with, are we going to do bigger, regular bond issuances? And I'm asking y'all and Mr. Lane, are we going to do regular 4-year bond cycles? Or are we going to space those out to 6 years? Like that to me is the question that we need y'all's guidance on. But in the meantime, we have $1 billion worth of not exciting work, but repairing places where students are learning right now so that they don't fall down around them. Like, we're not exaggerating that need. We know that that's probably only going to increase. Ms. Mitchell, is that?
Absolutely.
And then these consolidation kind of conversations and right sizing, kind of like Chapel Hill is having, those are going to be nearly impossible conversations for this board and future boards to wrestle with on behalf of families and the community impact. Those are the least palatable conversations to ever have in education spaces. But I feel like we sit here and have to wrestle with how we do that together. And I don't know if y'all don't run a bond this year, if I think that number actually just will increase. Like, we can't continue to defer maintenance. We can't. And so that's what I think I'm struggling with in this space is how we do that together with y'all's wisdom.
That's a great question. And from where I sit, it is whether it's a bond referendum or a limited obligation bond or other financing type, it is how do we get the money that's needed to move forward in those critical areas. Timing wise, we're not ready for a bond. Okay, we had it programmed for a bond, but when I talked about shovel readiness and checklists, those things are real. And so when we look at what cash we've spent since the last bond, we also look at that actual cash spent since the 2022 bond is about $100-some million, although it was for $460 million. So from a cash flow perspective, if about 100+ million has been spent since 2022, there are ways that we can make sure reasonably, how do we continue at least on a similar pattern? So I will say our intent is to make sure that based on actual cash spend, projected need, we come up with a strategy that we can move forward. Time-wise, we have to finalize if we'll do a referendum by June to meet the timelines that are required to get it on the ballot. It has to be done by July. And there are many steps prior to that. From a planning perspective, I don't know if we'll be able to hit that target right at this moment, but we do have on our list to sort of vet where we are. There may be some things that could be carved out, but from a process perspective, we will get pushback just based on spend. If it's too high and we're not showing evidence, we spend at that level. In the past, sometimes that has been the barrier for us not having, not moving forward as quickly as desired. From where I sit, I know that there's a $2 billion need that's there. The question is, from a cash flow, how do we map options to get us there? Even if we don't do a referendum in 26, what does that look like with using limited obligation bonds, which we have done for the schools, and that is an option. We all know the importance of addressing these pent-up needs, and so that is in the forefront, and we will do our part to help us get there in a way that's affordable, in a way that we know that we can get across all the finish lines when it comes to actually getting approved for those things.
Just as a follow-up, do you have any, I hear you strongly leaning away from a GO bond this year. I hear it very strongly. And I heard you switch to if language in our most recent previous meeting. So do you have any sense of the capacity that you might have if you're doing lobs?
Well, let us come back. We're not ready to have that conversation at this moment because there are two things happening right now. There are projects that are underway that we know that may have the potential of having cost overruns. I'm sure you'll see that in some of your current projects. So we really have to go back and recalibrate what's down and in the pipeline, what's available, and then in smaller increments, be very strategic in addressing those most pressing needs. We're hopeful to come back to our board in April with a little bit more conversation, and May, just sort of what that looks like. We've just had a lot of unusual things that have increased cost for existing projects, which is unfortunate, but it is a reality. So let us come back and say, well, what does this look like? And the superintendent and I, have talked about trying to identify what are the most pressing and figure out, well, what does that look like from a cash flow perspective and prioritizing the most pressing issues.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to Dr. Lee. He had his hands up first, then Mr. Tab. Then I'm gonna move us forward. I'm looking. Hold on, Commissioner Burton, because I want to make sure if anyone else had questions before I circle back to you. Go ahead, Mr. Tab. Go ahead, Dr. Lee, then we'll come to you.
So I had a question. You had a slide up that it was a pie chart that said 58% was immediate, 42% was 10-year need. With the consolidation plan that you have, does that change those percentages at all? So say we consolidate Watts and Club, would that consolidation move that percentage? So
So yes, if we select those, it will change those numbers because the consolidation, if we are not reusing those schools, we would no longer require the maintenance and repair for those. So we would see a savings in that, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then just really quickly, I saw Lakewood Montessori Middle had 310 kids. What's the capacity for Lakewood
Yeah,
Montessori?
that school is maxed out.
So
It's,
310 is the most again?
yeah, it's a very full school. Yeah.
Okay.
There is the possibility that that school may grow in the future as the YMCA moves out of their lease in the future. So we may be able to expand that school, but it still sits on a very small site. It is
Yeah.
significantly smaller than a middle school site should
Yeah,
be.
it's a
Yeah.
very small school. I just
Yeah.
saw the small number.
Yeah.
And you were talking about small schools, so
Yeah.
there's nothing that can happen there. Not that I'm saying it should go. I don't think.
Yeah. It's a very
Yeah,
successful
it's just,
school.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for both bodies, for the reporting. Just a quick observation, me just being on the outside now, being on the board. We come to this point each time that we have to deal with the budget. So my direct question is, what do we need to do that's different in the approach so that we don't end up in the same place each time of trying to figure out what we need to do? Because this is like recycles every year of a budget conversation. So I would like to hear more about what we may need to do that's very different so that we can start those kinds of conversations.
One thing I need to correct something that I said earlier. Our spend, the DPS spend is closer to 200 million versus the 100 million. So I wanted to correct myself. I always have to fact check. So to correct that, I do feel as though we're doing a lot of things right. We've had a convergence of shifts federally, statewide, and in so many other areas that have incrementally caused us to be in a very tough space from the standpoint of enrollment shifts, which impacts how much money you get from the federal and state side, the supply chain issues, which happened once COVID hit, all your construction costs went up tremendously. They've come back down, they normalized, and then probably about a year ago when there were some policy shifts, labor chain, supply chain issues, costs went up again. So we're dealing with a convergence of a lot of different things on the operating side plus capital. Good strategy and planning will get us where we're needing to go. And I gave the example of how we got it right with the last bond program when we did the prep with the design build work or the design for 18 months. And then by the time it came on board for us to do the referendum, we could pull that trigger. So from my perspective, if there are projects that you're looking at right now that are new construction and you know without a shadow of a doubt there's a need for a new high school, for instance, the county could make available dollars for that design work, which is usually about 7%, if not more, that you would allocate for that. And for a project looking at, that's a pretty significant number. So we would work to do that. And then planning for when the referendum happens. But and if that didn't, that we would have a backup plan. I would just say we're doing a lot of things right. We learned from Northern back in the 2016 referendum. I remember that so well because the number probably wasn't enough. It was about 96 million, but based on our spend, that's why it was in that range. We passed the referendum. It was 50 million set aside for Northern. Probably about 4 months later, we realized that it was not the right number. So I feel as though we've gotten a lot right since then. And so we're in the the right direction from that perspective. We just don't have enough money. I think that's the that has been the challenge. But I do feel as though the county and the schools are coordinating a lot differently, and which is helping us in these trickier times. But to your point, uh, going forward, we need to be truthful to ourselves about process and also our realities on all sides of it. But making those really hard decisions from a prioritization perspective, because it will be very difficult to afford all that's out there that's needed, not only just from the schools, but also other priorities that the county has to underwrite from a debt perspective.
I think, Mr. Taylor, from our point, and Ms. Mitchell mentioned it on slide 6, moving from a place of being reactive to be proactive in terms of how we operate as a school system. We have been operating at a break fix standpoint. And the example I always use is HVAC. If we know the life expectancy of HVAC system is 7 to 10 years, then if school A gets a replacement this year, 7 to 10 years, they need to be on the list to get a replacement of that same HVAC system. And so being proactive when it comes to how we are maintaining our facilities.
Really quick, Commissioner
Yes,
Burton.
very quick. I know County Manager Hager mentioned about the schools got $460 million bond, 200 million has been spent, and we want things to be shovel ready. I was wondering if we can get a list of what the schools have spent the money on to help facilitate making sure things are shovel ready when a bond is done, so there's no money left over, things like that. That's all I had.
Dr. Lewis, that's something staff can make sure that we get over to the county. All right, well, I'm sorry to push us forward, y'all, but we're way over time. So we have our 2 budget presentations coming up next. I forget which group. We'll start with Mr. Teeter, Durham Public Schools, and then we'll go to the county. I'm gonna ask folks who are giving presentations if y'all can keep it tight so we can keep it moving.
Okay, good morning, School Board, County Commissioners, Dr. Lewis, County Manager Hager. Got the pleasure of sort of presenting an update as well as a forecast of sorts for Durham Public Schools where our funding is concerned. And so I will do the bulk of the talking, and at various points, Dr. Lewis is going to insert and make some remarks and comments where appropriate. And so we are okay to progress to the next slide. We just want to start with celebrations. And so County Manager Hager and Mr. Lane were here for our most recent meeting where we were able to provide updates just sort of on the fiscal stability of the district and the work that we've done in the past 16 months to stabilize Durham Public Schools finances. And so on the next slide, we sort of lift up our celebrations that the finance team in Durham completed 2 audits in 1 year of time and brought Durham Public Schools back current on the audit cycle. And so it's so important for us to have that work done so that we can accurately convey where we are. And so we've had lots of calls for transparency in Durham. And so we really didn't have anything to be transparent about. And so now we have a framework to operate from with audited current financials that we can talk about. And it's the first, the 24-25 audit that was just presented was the first one completed on time in Durham Public Schools since fiscal year 2021. So we're very thrilled about that. And so in the course of that, so this administration came on board sort of midstream in the 24-25 year, and there was only so much we could do about certain things, and they were going to be findings no matter what. But we were very glad to reduce the findings in that audit from 7 to 4. We know that 3 of them we corrected mid-year when I got here in November of 2024, and we expect them to fall off in the next audit because we got those corrected and on track. And then there's one that showed significant improvement in the second half of that 24-25 year compared to the first, and high likelihood that that will fall off. And so for the 25-26 audit, we're sort of preparing for a reality of 1 or 0 findings for that report. And the compliance work for 25, 26 is already underway, and auditors are on site next week looking at our activity through February. We also had in Durham a number of management letter comments from 23, 24, so they weren't worthy of a write-up, but just recommendations to tighten things up. And there were 6 of those in 23, 24. They dropped to 2 in 24, 25, and looking forward to 0 in that space as we continue to tighten things up in finance. In the midst of all that work, we also did some work to move to a new ERP, so a new financial and payroll system. And so Durham had been using the same payroll system since the mid-90s, and that technology is sunsetting in the near future. And we were in a space where our financial system was operating in a different environment from our payroll system. We've brought the two together. They're operating in the same space. And so we've joined a cohort of about 89 other school systems that use the software that we've brought on board. So very pleased to be in that space and use the software that I'm comfortable with. And then in the meantime, we've been busy updating standard operating procedures for our folks throughout the district. And we've made our first updated finance procedure manual since 2017 to sort of bring folks along with how we're doing business now. And that helps us to mitigate those audit findings, right, with just current procedures and active training. On the next slide is something that we're particularly proud of, right? So we're looking at ourselves in the context of the largest 12 districts in the state of North Carolina and looking at fund balance usage in 2025. And you can see that we're one of 2 districts in the Big 12 that added money to fund balance rather than spending fund balance. And so there's really just sort of a testament to the hard work that we did to transition off of the reliance of ESSER funds, right? And that's been a challenge for a lot of school systems that made some very expensive decisions when they had ESSER money or COVID relief money. And so we did a lot of hard work when we got here to just sort of reorient Durham's reality. And you can see 2 of our colleagues in the Big 12 do not yet have a published audit in the clearinghouse. And so they're the deadline for North Carolina was by the end of December. The federal government requires them to be done by the end of March. And so we were on that hamster wheel when I got here, and very glad that we're off of that now. So so we'll provide an update when we hear about those other 2 to give context, but just want to lift up our budgeting practices and what we're doing here. On the next slide, is just some further information on the fund balance sort of history for Durham Public Schools. And so a couple of years ago, the district consumed nearly $9 million of fund balance, largely connected to classified pay issues that unfold, and I won't carry you back through. And so we've been very sort of proud to start to restore some of that, and for all the very good reasons for why we like to have some fund balance on hand. I'll also share, right, you see a bit of a disconnect between total fund balance and then the amount that's available. And so we're in a position where over the last couple of years, Durham Public Schools loaned money to our school nutrition program. And that's sort of the biggest aspect to that. And so they owe us $8 million. But positive news in that space is that in this current year, we have not had to loan them additional money, and they have actually made a little bit of money as a program this year, to the point where we'll be able to start recouping what they owe us and restoring that to our local fund balance in lieu of them having that liability against us. So just want to lift that up and offer that context. On the next slide, we start to move into some challenges that we had to contemplate and wrestle with, and hopefully all of my other colleagues in K-12 have been thinking the same way. And so on the next slide, we've got some very sort of specific situations we had to contemplate. And so when we came on board, folks will recall the press conference that happened in this room with Dr. Lewis and myself as we unpacked what Durham's budget reality was. And then we found that there were a number of positions, 315 to be exact, that had not been properly budgeted for in the school system's budget. And we did a lot of work to bring that under control. So that had a value of about 4.5% of our personnel budget in that reality, which is far more, even in scenarios where we're comfortable with assuming lap salary, that's past my comfort point to have it 4.5%. In the current year, that target shifted, right? So it was 18.6 million before. It was about 7.7 in the current year, which is 1.6% of our personnel budget. So a much better target. And at this point in time, we have built a proposal moving into the new school year where we do not depend on lap salary, and we get out of that practice of depending upon lap salaries to balance our budget in the school system. And so a lot of that is just really following our existing models, our existing allocation models for personnel in the school system. In tandem with that, we know that the state of North Carolina is going to react to our declining enrollment. And so we're expecting 7.2 million or so less in state resources next year. We're also bracing for 2 new charter schools opening next school year and the potential migration of 1,000 students to those charter schools. And that will increase our responsibilities to them by about 6.6 million. And so 3 things that we had to wrestle with very carefully and make sure that we were in a position to handle. And so far, we have run a very tight staffing allotment position control process for the year ahead to make sure that our school staffing is in alignment with all these realities, right, that are on the screen. So could have had a real mess if we didn't prepare for that. On the next slide, we start to talk about sort of our continuation costs and really just in this environment, right, of, and it's been this way my whole career, that the school system sort of goes first in determining what a budget will look like. We get a request to our partners at the county, and then you all formulate what you can or can't do for us with the resources that you have, which I absolutely do not envy what you have to do. And so I would rather do what I do. So we then also in recent history do all this in the absence of a state budget or a clear state budget and what they might do. And so we've seen some proposals just yesterday from the governor in his efforts to persuade the General Assembly to take some action for the current year. But again, we don't know. And then also it goes without saying the federal uncertainty that we've had to wrestle with as we plan for our time ahead. So all that to say, on the next slide here, as we start to contemplate continuation scenarios, we have to sort of prepare for what are the most expensive scenarios possible based on our historical knowledge of North Carolina school systems. And so we're preparing for a 5% assumption for personnel costs from the state of North Carolina that would then in turn put pressure on our obligations for locally funded employees. The governor's proposal that came out yesterday was sort of a blend of those things. And so he's asking the General Assembly for the year that we're in now to contemplate a 5.8% average increase for teachers and then 2.5% for other types of state employees. And so he's got I don't know what will happen with that. And so that's just something that we're also watching, and we may have to do something as a school system in the current year if there's any kind of action over the next couple of months. We know that our retirement contributions and our health insurance contributions increase every year. We're preparing for a slight increase with the retirement rate. With all the headlines we've seen with the state health plan, we're anticipating probably a pretty high increase of about $600 per employee that the state treasurer may ask us to contribute. We're still getting used to the new state treasurer, as I'm sure the county staff is. And so we're just trying to develop a rhythm with the new state treasurer and how he thinks about those various funds. And so all that to say, right, we're looking at 6.1 million or so that we need to contemplate. On the next slide, again, I know that you all think about this as well. In addition to those salaries and benefits, just rising utility costs. Duke Energy is always pursuing increases, and we don't know where that's going to land. And so we prepare for a worst case scenario there, should their wishes be honored. And then also we monitor very carefully our property insurance market, auto insurance, general liability, things of that nature. And then we've applied onto those pressures our true up, or what we would have to share with charter schools in the event that we received additional funding to accommodate continuation needs. As we roll into the next section, I'll just remind sort of everyone in the room that we have 2 more school board meetings, a work session and a meeting where the school board will continue to ask questions of Dr. Lewis and myself as we work through expansion items and what new things that we may ask for in this process. And so just know we're not in final form, but letting you could just kind of see some things that are on the table that we're thinking about. And
Yeah,
the microphone.
I think it's a good point to interject too, how the board and community has seen this recommendation evolve over time as we have had more and more opportunities for community input. And so we try to respond to what we hear before we get to a final product.
Yes. So all that to say, I think we started with a much more conservative proposal for expansion in this process, and we've just received quite a bit of feedback in different ways, particularly where compensation is concerned, and then the sort of the new pressures that we're seeing also with Duke University's announcement with their new minimum wage. And so if we want to progress a couple of slides. All right, so one thing I wanted to talk about just sort of is the classified pay in Durham Public Schools, and we had to do some work. There were 3 different firms that came through Durham, and I won't call them by name because I don't want to be sued. But three different firms that came through and did a variety of analysis on salary schedules, and the salary schedules that we sort of walked into were a little bit perplexing. And they conveyed an hourly rate, a monthly rate, and an annual rate of pay for our employees. And so Durham, as for more classified employees than not, a healthy majority of our classified employees, they earn a monthly salary. We've got a couple of segments of classified employees that are paid on an hourly timesheet, such as our bus drivers and our before and after care employees. And so, and I'll go into this a little bit on some future slides about the arithmetic of those schedules and how some folks computed hourly rates in the past, just for some additional context that I hate that I even have to explain. But nonetheless, we've received just sort of a lot of attention and feedback about the desire for us to align our minimum wage with the county government minimum wage of the 1922. And so that would be just a slightly greater than 12% kind of shift to that bottom floor. And when we think about that, there's a couple of different ways, right, we can go about that. Do you raise that minimum wage and just address the folks that are at the current minimum wage and you don't deal with the compression that creates? Or do you flush that raise sort of throughout the table to mitigate compression, right? And so in that model of making that kind of movement as a collective initiative, it would be a little over $13 million to do that in Durham. We didn't want to lose sight of the continuation figures already assume some degree of raise, and we didn't want to duplicate those numbers there. And so we backed that out of what that cost would be. And so it would take an additional 10.5 or so beyond what the request is in continuation for compensation. And I just want to lift up, right, that this is something that came through a lot of public feedback through hearings, as well as the meet and confer process with the Educator Association. On the next slide, we touch on just that arithmetic that I talked about earlier. And so if you look at our salary schedule from the previous year, like on our scales range from NC1 to an NC19, and so NC1 being the lowest scale. And if you were to look at that scale, it was reflecting an hourly rate of $18 and some change per hour. The folks who developed that schedule, they did the math not quite the right way for calculating, and they did it in a way that reflects 48 weeks in a year versus 52. And so we went back behind that and did sort of the appropriate math of assuming 2,080 work hours in the year and did the construct differently. And then that established, based on the monthly rates we're paying to our lowest earning employees, at $17.15 an hour in Durham. So on the next slide, we just show another example of how that varies, and that translation box always kind of covers up what I'm saying, but it makes a difference in terms of how that math lands. And so it's a difference of 48,000 a year and 52,000 a year for our employees if you do those rates correctly. So just would reiterate that we've not paid anyone incorrectly. We're paying them on those quoted monthly salaries that are on our schedules. But just the depiction of what the hourly rate equates to had not been right in the schedules that we walked into. On the next slide, we talk about that further. I won't belabor what I just said for sake of time, so we'll move on to the next slide. And we'll talk about our transportation safety assistance. So in the last budget cycle, the county commissioners made available to us the funding to pay for a bus driver supplement and $200 a month, and we appreciate that investment. I have not heard that we have ongoing transportation issues like we did before, and so we feel good about the investment that we've made in our bus drivers. And so we've received a request through our meet and confer process to include safety assistance, and we got the request to look at 200 per month, and administration is suggesting only 100 so that we can differentiate between bus drivers and safety assistants and where that's concerned. And so that cost is a little over 86,000 for that particular initiative. On the next slide, we have received a tremendous amount of feedback from our occupational and physical therapists. And so those are employees that are technically classified employees. Throughout the history of school systems, some years they were treated as certified employees in North Carolina, other years they're classified. And so they've been in the classified space for quite some time. And what we have, after hearing the feedback, at just about every school board meeting, we've done some research in terms of how we compare in our payment practices for that population compared to other school systems. And so a lot of our urban districts still treat them as classified employees, but pay them in a manner that's consistent with other licensed related service providers like speech pathologists and audiologists, and trying to bring them in concert with one another. And so we've developed a scale for them that's a little over 269,000, and then also wanted to benchmark our occupational therapy assistants to be in alignment with them in a way that's consistent with what we see in other spaces. And so that's an additional almost 33,000 to make a new scale for those folks. When we originally contemplated this, right, as we're in the working phase, we were looking at a potential 5% increase across the board for classified employees. And so my team is going to do some work to go back and reevaluate this particular element and see how that lines up in the model that looks at that 12%. So we may, as we work through the next couple of board meetings at the school system, you may see this slide tweak a little bit as we resituate this in that context. On the next slide, I think we're almost done, just lifting up, the charter school share. If we were to receive the funds necessary for those expansion costs, there's 3.8 million that would float to the folks at the charter schools. Next slide. Sort of the capital outlay space. And so I know we've had conversation about capital outlay in here. And so on the next slide, we just lift up the desire for the county to continue that current commitment of the $5 million for capital outlay needs. And so that in tandem with other resources that we receive, such as lottery and repair and renovation fund from North Carolina, able to make things work there. And then lifting up our technology plan requests that we received, and really wanting to run that through capital outlay to mitigate having to share those funds with charter schools. And so the original request that we received was to refresh 25,000 Chromebooks. And so we've knocked that down to a little over 17 to allow time for administration to further evaluate what the delivery model looks like in the K-5 space. And so just some context around that. And then about 13 years ago, the district made investment in some interactive panels of sorts. And so looking to do some sort of refresh for that in our classrooms, I think, as well as installing it in some classrooms where they currently don't exist. And so looking at 1,786 of those devices that we would manage on a lease. And so looking at a total capital outlay of a little over 7.8. And I think the last couple of cycles, the school system requested 8 million for capital outlay. And so this is a little bit less than that. On the next slide, I think I was just lifting up that trend. And so I believe this is my last slide before questions and comments. And so, it's not lost on us the historic investments that Durham County Commissioners have made in Durham Public Schools. And my colleagues in other school systems are all very envious of the reality that I get to work with in Durham compared to theirs. And so we wanted to also recognize what you're wrestling with, and that we don't envy what you're wrestling with. And at the same time, we're also still balancing that with sort of lifting up what we see as priorities for moving our work forward and supporting our staff. And look forward to, on the next slide, just sort of the call for questions, and happy to support however we can. And just a reminder that we've got 2 more meetings that we're going to work through before we make a formal request. And I think now we'll take questions for real on the next slide.
I'm gonna have Mr. Lane go first,
Oh,
and
okay.
then we'll
Perfect.
do group questions for both presentations. Thank you, Mr. Teeter. Don't go too far, though.
Yep.
Keith and I will tag team again, and we'll get started. And many of the slides I will skip because we did talk about them at the board meeting last week and our board meeting also with our retreat. So if you'll skip to the next slide, but we will give some overview of some key points as reminders. The guiding principles will not go into that, but that's in your document as a handout, and there's a slide there. We'll also note the context for shaping the 26-27 budget process, highlight some expenditure revenue trends, and outline next steps. And next slide, please. This is an eye test that we all will flunk, but that is in your document. But it's the guiding principles for developing the budget. And we've had these in place and we've refined over the years, but they have kept us in the right framework as we've tried to keep a sound fiscally organization. Next slide. The development framework, we did this year some things that were a little bit different. We did go through a base budget review that was quite rigorous starting in the fall, and we have continued looking at reoccurring dollars as well as those that are one-time. We've asked departments to look at what's required by general statute and local mandates, as well as board priorities, and looking at those different buckets so we can isolate how we manage going forward when we're in a situation that there are limited dollars. We'll not go through all of these, and we're continuing this process and review, which will be ongoing through the next fiscal year. Next slide. This slide just shows what we are obligated to do legally, and then some examples of optional services that are legally required or or we have the authority to do. This is one list that departments are using to help crosswalk how do they fit. And as you will note, there are many departments that are there that may not be on the list, but they are priority because of our community. Next slide. Our budget is $1 billion with all funds, of which about 700 million, as you know, is for our operating budget. Most of our dollars come from property taxes and sales taxes. Our sales taxes is an area that is economically sensitive, and so when folks aren't spending or there's some confidence issues with what the economy is doing, sales taxes go down. So when we talk about debt service, operating, that being 18% of our fund, that presents more pressure for us. Next slide. Personnel and educational costs comprise about 75% of our budget, with some of the larger departments being social services, sheriff, public health, et cetera. Durham Public Schools, Durham Tech, and our pre-K funding is the second largest area within our budget. That particular functional area is about 10% higher than the state average. So there is a tremendous commitment within Durham, and has been for years, to support our educational infrastructure. Next slide. This slide just shows some highlights of key areas. And I know often when we come here, we focus on Durham Public Schools, but wanted to just remind everyone of some of those other areas that we support. We support about 130,000 of our residents with our DSS operations, some of it through Medicaid funding, some food and nutrition services, et cetera. Public health is about 12,000 of our residents that use public health for services. That number increases to about 30,000 when you're talking about the educational workshops and educational services that they do and other non-clinical kinds of things. Won't go through all of these, but we felt it important just to highlight those. And next, Keith will go into some of the more detailed financial fiscal outlook.
Thank you, Manager Hager. Next slide, please. And I think you can go past this slide. Next slide, please. Before I start, I do want to, I think Board Member Tab said, feels like we go through this every year as it relates to the CIP and even the annual budget. But that is, I think that is a part of the process that we all need to learn to enjoy as we try to deal with a world where we've got nearly infinite needs and finite resources to meet them. So we're always in constant pressure. There's always constant pressure to discuss a CIP, even though it may go out 10 years, every year or every semi-annually, and obviously the annual budget. I would say for Durham County, our office that we're trying, and the information we're trying to convey to management is that we are cautious. I don't even know that we're optimistic. We are very cautious, a little bit pessimistic. The world right now feels a little uncomfortable. The near future economically is concerning and cloudy. It is not as bright as it was 5 to 10 years ago, and we're having to face that. I'm also concerned that we're at a bit of an inflection point, and I'll point that out in a few minutes, why I'm concerned about that, at least just financially, and it's just a math inflection point. Why the caution? There are jobs that we have lost in Durham County that are high-paying jobs. We are an intelligence-driven economy, and we are also a public adjacent economy. And what do I mean by that? 8 of the top 16 employers in Durham County are either public entities like Durham Public Schools, Durham County Government, the City of Durham, EPA, that get a lot of money from federal sources and state sources, and those two entities have not been really kind to local governments in North Carolina over the last couple of years, and I don't see them getting any nicer, and I don't see additional funding loosening up anytime soon. So that has real pressure on Durham County economically. Next slide, please. Just a few other headlines. I won't go through them. More RTP layoffs at Lenovo, National Institutes of Health, things of that nature that cause us concern about the expected continued growth economically that we hope to have in comparison to what we've gotten used to in the last decade. Next slide, please. I just noted some of the key areas of the key industries in Durham County. There's life sciences, again, that's sort of public adjacent, ag tech and financial tech, and healthcare and education, healthcare being one of the dominant ones. On the one side, healthcare tends to be the area where there is some job growth, but not necessarily in Durham, where we're much more research oriented around healthcare issues, and that is funded largely with federal dollars and some state dollars, and I don't see that funding continuing at the pace it once was. Next slide, please. So all of those are economically concerning issues happening. This is just job growth trending over the last couple of years. And what you see in the last half of 24, 25, and through 25 is actually even stalled job growth or net loss. This is nationally, but it's indicative of what's happening here. And it's that job growth and income growth that powers sales tax growth for us. It powers the buying of houses. It powers the ability to pay property tax. It powers the ability to pay higher property tax. Higher property tax then turns around and funds DPS and the nearly infinite needs the county has in other areas. Next slide, please. So some areas of loss of revenue that are concerning to the county right now is ARPA dollars are going away for the county, and we had applied approximately $1.8 million of ARPA funding for some pre-K support, direct pre-K support, indirect pre-K support through DPS of $500,000, and some school health nurses. That ARPA dollar is going away, and we have to make a decision. Are we going to fund that? And I know pre-K support is very important to our county commissioners, so we'll have to find that additional $1.8 million. Public health is going to experience some losses from this big, beautiful bill, if you will choose to call it that. Some SNAP funding. We lost $1.4 million for a DINE program that's been in place for 30 years that educates children, educates parents. That's 13 FTEs that we have to make a decision about. State grants, there's some money lost from child health. This is $737,000 reductions. Some HIV related partner services, that's a $200,000. So you're looking at, close to $2.5 million or something like that. If I'm doing my math, $2.3 million loss in potentially in public health. Next slide, please. Department of Social Services, again, getting hit on the federal side of things. The federal reimbursement for SNAP administrative costs, this has already happened and will happen, is decreasing from 50% to 25%. What that means is the county has to make up that 25% loss of revenue from the federal government. And I forget exactly what that number was, Manager. It's on the next slide, but we'll tell you. But there's also potential $2 million decrease in reimbursement based off of significant changes to work requirement for non-citizen eligibility that potentially could happen through some of the federal changes in guidelines for our social services area that will have to pick up the cost or decrease the amount of services that we provide to our 133 direct and indirect 1,000 citizens of Durham County. Next slide, please. So this is complicated, but what it boils down to is there's an error rate that in DSS when we work with SNAP benefits to citizens, and the federal government has decided that that error rate is too high. And if it's too high in the near future, they will penalize Durham County or Department of Social Services. If you look at that circle, our error rate right now is 1.2% in Durham County, but the federal government is recognizing it at the state level. The state error rate on average is 7%. If it stays at 7%, that error rate, it is estimated that Durham County would lose $3.6 million. If it went up to above 10%, Durham County would lose $11 million. Even if Durham County's error rate was 1%, it's still at the state level. The federal government would not give that money to every county in the state, and the Durham County would indirectly lose $3 million, maybe $7 million, depending on the error rate. Those are real dollars that we have to pay attention to in just the intergovernmental revenue sources that we have. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, in case you didn't know, board members, the state law says for Durham public schools and school funding, counties have to provide support for maintaining school facilities, capital, basically the capital issues and operating capital issues. However, we can support current expense funding, but I underline at the bottom there, that's within the financial resources that we have and is consistent with the fiscal policy of the Board of County Commissioners. We currently fund DPS at $225+ million, I think, if I'm rounding it up, in current expense funding annually. Along with that, we talked earlier about $60 million of our $90 million in debt service is paying for DPS-related buildings that we've already dealt with, either built or are renovating, and we're paying the debt cost on that. So it's a significant amount of funding. I will, just to give you an idea of the size DPS is as a part of our budget. The next biggest general fund department we have is the Sheriff's Department. In terms of straight county costs, it's in the $50 million range. So Durham Public School funding is 4+ times the size of every other department we have in the county. So as your requests grow and your needs grow, think of it as 4 times the amount of money that Durham County has to find to consider, roughly compared to every other department we have in the county. Next slide, please. Local per pupil funding comparisons. This is some benchmarking we do annually. These numbers came from DPI, so they may be a little different from their methodology, but it just is something you already know. You're well-funded in comparison to our other county districts and the ones in particular we compare to. I think Orange County always is a little bit ahead of us. I think we're number 5 in school districts throughout the state in local per pupil funding. Just wanted to note that. Next slide, please. This slide shows you actual expenditures by county, state, and federal funding, roughly. And the trending here, what I want you to note is that yellow line at the top is state funding. It's flattening out. We're losing students. They haven't been as generous as we would all like them to be in general. Federal funding has dropped off a cliff. That's largely ARPA dollars, or ESSER dollars, as you may say them. But look what has taken up the slack, and look at the slope over the last 3 years of county funding. The issue with that, the inflection point, is can that level of growth continue every year from Durham County? And what I mean by an inflection point, without a tax rate increase, property tax rate increase. That is the inflection point we're at. Next slide, please. This just shows the percentage of school personnel supported by funding source. And I think ultimately what it shows is a significant amount of funding, local funding supporting DPS positions. The only one that's comparable to us, I think, again, is Orange County, because we're well-funded county. There are a significant number of DPS positions supported with local dollars, more so than many other comparable districts. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, the county property tax rate the last 2 years has gone up 6% each year, the property tax rate increase. And those are the last 2 years have been the 2 highest tax rate increases Durham County residents have experienced in the last 30 years. You add on the city property tax rate increase, and it's a 20-cent tax rate increase for every city resident in Durham County over the last 3 years. And that doesn't include the effect of revaluation on many folks. The big question for everyone is that type of increase sustainable for any number of reasons? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So let's get real quick into 26, 27 budget estimates, what we're looking at. Thanks to David Ades back here, Deputy Budget Director. We are looking at property tax rate, trying to assess natural growth in property tax revenue and sales tax revenue. What do I mean by natural growth? Natural growth is every year we have a growth in the amount of property tax revenue we get without a tax rate increase. And it's that revenue that funds a lot of things automatically: salary increases, benefits increases, inflation-related increases. But we'll get to that slide in just a minute. But what I want you to note here, this is education costs. This is DPS, DTC, and pre-K funding combined. And look at the first 5 years starting 2016, 17. See that green line? Additional funding going to those 3 areas was 6 million, 7 million, 7 million, 5 million. But look, starting in, I can't see underneath it, but I think it's 2021, something like that. You see that number jump to 19 million, then it was 12 million, then it's 14 million. 2 years ago, it was 28 million. That included some ARPA funding. Last year, it was 16, or the year we're in right now, 25, 26, it was 16 million. There's a 20 million asked on the table right now from DPS. That's a profoundly different level of additional funding each year over the last 5 years compared to the 5 years before. Inflection point. Can we afford that? That type of increase every year, over and over again, without putting ourselves in a position to consider property tax rate increases every year. Next slide, please. This is a concerning graph. This is ADM, average daily memberships. I get this information from DPI for Durham Public Schools, charter schools, private schools, and home schools. What I'm focusing on right here, that red line, is the second month ADM historically, all the way through the current year we're in right now for Durham Public Schools, and comparing that mainly to the green line, which is charter school growth. But what I want you to note, and what we're concerned about, is that the number for second month for the current year is down in the $29,000 pupil range. I can't see that number this far away, but it's lower than the per pupil ADM number from 2002, or as far back as I can go. There are less students in Durham Public Schools now than there were almost 25 years ago. There are obviously more students in charter schools. There's been some growth in private schools and some growth in home schools. But that is a concerning number. Next slide, please. Because where is that going? In that, since 14-15, that was the high water mark for Durham Public School ADM numbers. I think we have lost a net of 700 students. That includes growth in charter schools. I think it's a loss of 1,300 plus students, maybe more, 3,000. I can't remember the number, but it's a significant number of loss in net students in charter and public schools, while Durham Public School current expense funding has gone up $100 million since 14-15 annually. Again, the question, mathematical question is, can that type of growth continue without a property tax rate every year? And I feel like we're at an inflection point. Let me say this bluntly. I do not think it is possible to continue considering that type of growth. Next slide, please. So our revenue issues, economic growth. We have slowing growth in sales tax revenue, and I think I'll show you a slide on that in just a second. It's practically been flat over the last 3 years. Why is it flat? We have more people moving into the county, but much of their dollars are taken up already in things that aren't sales tax taxable. Gasoline goes up, insurance goes up, house payments go up, rent goes up. Those things take money out of the system. They're not buying shirts and shoes or whatever things that are taxable. Remember, Manager Hager pointed out our two biggest revenue sources make up almost 80% of our revenue, property tax revenue and sales tax revenue. If one of those, sales tax revenue, is flat over the last 3 years in growth, essentially, where are we finding new money to pay for salary increases for county employees, to pay for DPS salary increases, to pay for vehicle replacements? How about paying for a whole new EMS staffing of an ambulance that we need to deal with population growth? All of these considerations. Local property market, we had a great revaluation from the standpoint that we finally captured what the true valuation of buildings were, but it put a lot of pressure on a lot of residents. And in actuality, there are a lot of appeals happening now. Our tax administrator can attest to that. So while the valuation went up initially, it's going back down just a little bit due to holdbacks and some appeals process. All that to be said, that is going to be putting continuing stress on citizens and businesses in Durham County to pay property taxes on a significantly higher valuation. We've lost our occupancy tax. We talked about that earlier, about why we're doing that, for hopefully some long-term investments, but it's a real loss in revenue. We talked about the intergovernmental revenue loss for public health, DSS, and things like that. And ultimately, we have really significant growing revenue variability. While I talk about what we got used to when Durham County was the little engine that was growing, we were growing consistently every year. It was always this magic, oh, we've got an extra $3 million in sales tax. Oh, we've got an extra $10 to $12 million in property tax without needing a property tax rate increase. And our expenses growth was a little bit slower, so we could fit a lot of things in. That whole concept has changed. There's more variability in our revenue sources, and nothing about the near future has convinced me that our economy is going to settle down and start growing at a pace we were used to in the last decade. Next slide, please. This is where I want to point out the flatness of sales tax growth. If you see those blue columns, that's a delta number. That was new sales tax growth in a given year that we could take into account, and we could help support DPS requests. At one point, it was $13 million just a couple of years ago, but look at the last 3 years. It was $1 million. It actually went negative in 25, 26, and we're estimating a massive and I say that sarcastically, $770,000 increase in sales tax, that doesn't fund a $20 million requested increase in DPS. Next slide, please. Property tax. This looks like a complicated graph, but it's not. The orange line is just an indication of a property tax rate increase that happened in any given year. The blue part of that column is the key number. That's natural growth in property tax revenue without a property tax rate increase. But what I want you to note, then the green part of the column is the additional property tax revenue from a property tax rate increase. What do you notice the last 2 years or the last 3 years? Property tax, natural growth in property tax revenue without a tax rate increase is higher than the previous 6 or 7. Great, it's growing. As we get bigger, we should get more, but it hasn't been enough. What have we had to do the last 3 years? We've had to have a tax rate increase each of those 3 years to meet DPS needs. Not only DPS needs, but to meet EMS needs, to meet salary needs, to pay for our benefits costs for the 2,300 employees that we have. The question is, are we at an inflection point where it has to happen every year to meet all those needs, a property tax rate increase? That's the fundamental issue we have. Next slide, please. What does 1 cent on the property tax bring in? David Ades, I'll put it on you personally, because he does these amazing estimates, has estimated that 1 cent will bring in $8.8 million. So that's how you find $20 million or $30 million. Do you simply divide 30 million by 8.8, and that's the tax rate increase needed? But remember, we also talked about the capital improvement plan. It has built into it a known tax rate increase that we're going to have to do over the next couple of years just to pay for the 22 GO bonds that we have to issue. So there's a 2, 3, 4 cent tax rate increase needed on that side of the equation that has to happen. Plus you're considering annual budget tax rate increases needed. Or you've got to figure out how to pull back on the expenditure side or find other revenues. We're limited on both sides of that. Next slide, please. So this isn't the entire budget. Our office tries to pull out key expenditure increases and key revenue increases. And when we sum it down, simplify it down, we have about $13.5 million in identified growth needs and expenditures for the county, and only $8.7 million in revenue, new revenue without a tax rate to pay for that. So to put it in frame for DPS, you all have asked for $10 million plus in continuation needs, just to continue what that's not a single new dollar for any new request. That's already more than we have available revenue to support. That means not considering any benefits cost increase for Durham County, not considering any requested need for a Durham County department. What's not included in this budget yet, or this $13 million, that doesn't include the $20+ million request from DPS. It doesn't include an expansion yet for county departments, doesn't consider any increase that they may need for personnel or salary or equipment. And it doesn't include a salary increase for any county employees yet. So if we were to add all that up, that's another $30, $40 million on top of the $13 million, with only $8.7 million in new revenue without a tax rate increase available to pay for it. We are at an inflection point. We have to make some hard decisions. Next slide, please. Key takeaways: slowing revenue and quickening expenditure growth. I feel like I have beat that horse a little bit too much, but I hope you hear it from economic indicators point to further challenges. We're going to have to really need, and I think this is where Manager Hager tries to stress it and does a great job. We have to consider long-term sustainability. We have to find our way through this year, next year, and we have to set ourselves up for reasonable success 6, 7, 8 years later. That's an important part of everyone's job here. I have to begin prioritizing early. What can we do? What's the most important? What do we not do? What's the return on investment of programs? That's part of what we talked about when the manager showed you mandated services versus non-mandated services. Difficult decisions are coming for all of us. We have to begin those strategic discussions now. As part of what the county is doing, we are monitoring quarterly reports for any early warning signs, for anything more that can indicate that it's going to get worse. We have to limit our mid-year fund balance amendments. Oftentimes, the manager and the board are asked in the middle of the year, every month, we need a little money for an emergency this, or a unplanned for need that, and we dig into our fund balance and try to help those people out. But we're going to have to consider that, limiting that to support our long-term sustainability, financial sustainability. And then it says it again, prioritize long-term fiscal sustainability. Cannot say that enough. We're not just making decisions for this year, but we're trying to set up a decision-making process in place that will help support the county and keep it fiscally viable for years to come. Next slide, please. Headwinds, and there are a lot of them. Durham County has an ERP implementation that is no small process. What's an ERP system? That's software that runs our HR, our purchasing, our budget, and our finance system. So you get one shot at replacing that, and if it doesn't go right, it is painful for years. So we will have to invest in terms of time, personnel, and cost to make sure that process happens correctly. ARPA backfill, we talked about the $1.8 million, and I'm sure there are going to be a number of nonprofits that pop up that had gotten used to some ARPA funding that say they're just getting started with doing good work, and they need money from us to continue that. CIP-related property tax rate increases, I talked about that. That's part of the long-range CIP plan or capital financing plan. But we also have to maintain our fiscal foundation, our fund balance, and our AAA bond rating. We're limited in what we can do to maintain that fundamental foundation. State and federal changes, particularly at the federal level, they are not a bunch of folks yet that I think we can count on for the next couple of years, to say the least. And so how do we deal with that? Stagnating revenue growth. We have to find new revenue sources, maybe go to the state legislature and beg them, I don't know, figure out, protest to them the need for new revenue sources for the county to find and support. Mission creep. What are we doing that's mandated versus non-mandated, and how do we consider paying for those in the future? Obviously, we have to pay and support our mandated services, but what about our non-mandated services? And then we have to pay attention to macroeconomic changes, inflation, and how we deal with that, and population growth. And that disconcerting trend of having population growth in Durham County, but continued decline in pupil growth. We are going to be, I did do a little bit of research, I think in the next 30 to 40 years, you're going to see a 10% increase in the 45 to on up age group in Durham County, and a corresponding 10% decrease in the 0 to 45 age group. We're going to get older, just like everybody else in America, particularly in Durham County. Why are we attracted to older folks? There's a wonderful health system that's going to attract retirees. And how do we deal with that? Next slide, please. Budget calendar. I think we're having this discussion on May the 10th. The next key dates, on March the 10th. The key dates through the rest of this month, starting tomorrow, the manager and the budget office and departments will begin having budget request meetings where she will hear the needs from many different departments, all the while knowing there's literally no dollars to fund it. So those should be interesting meetings. And then in May the 11th, she will present her manager's recommended budget to the Board of County Commissioners. There will be discussions at the tail end of May and early June where the board discusses the manager's recommended budget and makes changes as they see fit. Hopefully, we will get a board-approved budget on June the 8th, and we'll go from there, and then we'll start the process again. Next slide. I think that's it. Last little thing there. The manager asked our office to provide you with some additional information we gave to the Board of County Commissioners at a budget work session. And if you use that QR code, it'll take you to our Legistar system, and you can link on those blue links. There are many different documents you can look that hopefully support the discussion and presentation I just gave right now. Next slide, please. That's it, and how joyful a presentation it was. Any questions?
I'm sure there are plenty of questions. One day you will bring some joy into our space, Mr. Lane. All right, so I'm gonna try to go around and check for folks who haven't spoke yet, but I have you, Commissioner Burton, and make sure if they have questions. I'm gonna go, Ms. Chavez, I'm coming over to you.
All right, well, thank you both for those somewhat conflicting presentations. One thing I wanted to address was the charter school growth that is, just sitting with us. as Mr. Teeter has pointed out numerous times, we have very fertile ground for charters, given our generous county funding. And so on our side, we are working to more aggressively address some of the charter school growth. And I just wanted to invite Dr. Lewis or Ms. Cooper to share a little bit about how we're working to address those concerns around charter school growth. And because that is something we are, or Mr. or whomever, that is something we are well aware of. And we have new, charters opening up, and we need to, I personally think we need to be more aggressive, and I think our public affairs office has done a good job at really marketing us, because we are in a situation where we need to market ourselves in order to get people back. There are still misconceptions about what DPS offers, and even sometimes ideas that we have more that, like, for instance, the bus transportation crisis definitely was a crisis. And also there were other schools, there were, at least one charter school dealing with a similar problem. So we're not the only ones who are dealing with issues, but sometimes there's a perception that we, Durham Public Schools, are. So yes, I would invite our administration to share.
Yeah, I'll start, and definitely Ms. Cooper can jump in. I do think just coming in as an opportunity, it was very similar to this in Kansas City, where a lot of family and community members assumed that charter schools were private schools. And so just educating the community that charter schools are indeed public schools. And then the second misconception is that charter schools are outperforming your traditional neighborhood schools from the school system. And that's certainly not the case. And we have the receipts to show that as well, that they are not outperforming us. And so the more that we can continue to educate our community, but also listen to our families as it relates to why they choose to leave the DPS and then go to charters, and then they come back to DPS. But some folks have said that the money's not in their backpack when they come back with us. And so some of the things that we've heard from some of our families is, just the turnover sometimes in our staffing. And so we can address that by increasing our staff salary. Also the culture of our buildings as well. And so we're working with our principals too, and some of our principals have already reached out to some of these charter school families, because we know when they leave us where they're going, and then we can contact them and they come back to us. And so the grass is always not greener on the other side. And so when you think about the amount of money that we have to send to charter schools, most recently the amount of $51 million that one of my parents so eloquently put it, that we're paying $51 million in child support, for those charter schools. Sheena?
Good morning. Yes, the Office of Public Affairs has been very focused and intentional regarding its marketing efforts, specifically over the past 2 years, in engaging various niche audiences and making sure that we have a pipeline for students enrolling in Durham Public Schools. A lot of that work actually starts when our families welcome new children to their families. We've engaged with organizations to make sure we're getting information to those families when their children are first born, sharing information about our district, early childhood readiness, so they can be prepared to enter Durham Public Schools. We're hosting focus groups. We're sharing information with various parent groups about Durham Public Schools. We have ambassador programs to increase our reach among families, because we understand that families trust other families and they want to hear other parents' perspectives. So that is why we are equipping those individuals with information and resources. As you know, marketing, we can be very nimble, but it does take some resource, and that is financial resource, to ensure that we are broadening our reach to engage more families and share all of the great things about Durham Public Schools. But you'll certainly see in our public spaces now, we are taking more control over that narrative to be more proactive in sharing the great things that are happening in DPS, and we are starting to see some return on that investment. So we will continue to do that with more robust activity to showcase the excellence that is happening within our schools, amongst our staff, amongst our students, showing how a DPS education can really transform lives through various other initiatives. And so we will keep doing that. We'll keep being as resourceful as possible with our partnerships and with the financial resource that we are given, and we're excited about expanding that in the future. Thank you.
Yeah. And in that spirit, to sort of augment what Ms. Cooper discussed, right? So there are, we have been made aware through our sort of sister and brother school systems in the Greater City Schools Consortium, that there are vendors that have had success in other states with helping public school systems attract charter students back to their doors. And so we've done some due diligence with that. And so we're releasing an RFP this week. So we just finished legal review of an RFP to see what it would look like for a company such as that to work with us to augment the marketing efforts for Ms. Cooper's department and leverage their strategies on making that outreach to help folks come back to us. So I think we would be the first in North Carolina to leverage it, but there has been success with some of these vendors in other states. And the cost to us per student returning is far less than the dollars that would follow them from our state and federal funding sources. So we're in sort of that early exploration, looking forward to the responses we receive and unpacking those as a senior leadership team.
Thank you. Were there any commissioners who hadn't spoken yet? I'm coming to Ms. That had questions. Commissioner Ballantyne.
Yeah, so let me begin with a comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Madam Chair, is that good? Okay, thank you. Let me just begin with a comment, and I guess this comment is to my colleagues on the County Commissioners Board. We just came out of a reevaluation period where our residents received bills that they've never seen before. And so now we're in a situation where we may have to go back to them in the form of a tax hike. And I'm asking that my colleagues think hard and long about what that looks like for our residents. And so I don't want to put any more pressure on our residents than needs to occur. And so I'll ask you to consider that. At the beginning of the briefing today, someone talked about 100% utilization of seats in the school system by 2028. And then later on in one of the presentations, I heard there was additional loss of seats of 1,000 students. I think was related to the charter schools. Nonetheless, that seems to be pretty aggressive for us to get to 100% utilization by 2028. So I'd like to know, what that looks like and how to reconcile that information. And my second question is, there were 3 figures given for the money that charter schools receive. And so if you can reconcile those 3 amounts, one was an amount of 6 million, the other was in 2 million, and the other was in 3 million plus. And so if you could help me out with that, or help me understand that, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
I will take the charter piece and then defer to some colleagues about the seats. And so throughout the presentation, as we look at different spaces where we are, anytime that we seek additional revenue, we layer on the additional that we would need to pass on to the charters at that per pupil share. And so in the presentation, we sort of put in a couple of subtotals for that proportionate share, right? And so it would, if the full requests were funded, we would need the sum of those. But we just try to, as we go through various sections, we try to keep it in the forefront, those implications.
And the 100% utilization was a goal, or is a goal, in our current strategic plan that was developed in 2023. And so regardless of the number of buildings that we have in our inventory, a goal at that time was to ensure that there is 100% utilization. So utilizing all of our spaces to the maximum extent appropriate.
But also add, doesn't necessarily mean the school is full enrollment wise. Utilization wise, sometimes is a little under, so that we can make sure that there's flexibility as students move into the area, right? To have that. And for the lunch spaces and some of those other spaces that are within a school. We can talk a lot more about it though. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go to Commissioner Burton and then Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Umstead. I have one brief comment and some questions. Mr. Teeter, when you were up there around discussing the pension costs and the health insurance costs, I think it was like $6.156 million or something like that. That is for local positions, correct?
Correct.
Okay, because we have to meet that cost, what state paid positions are made, right? Because they're, okay.
That's right.
And I really want to hone in on that a little bit because as a former DPS employee, public school employee, we don't see those costs being paid for us, right? Those are costs that are being paid. They're not coming out of our checks, but they still have to be covered. You don't see the benefit of those pension costs being paid for you until you're retired. So that's something I think that can be explained better to the general public. The other thing that I want to ask about the $51 million to charters, that's just the local part, correct? Okay, but then the state puts in their part that goes into the schools. How many employees in DPS are paid less than $20 an hour, or how many are being paid $17.15 per hour?
I would need to, and I can pull that information today. I don't want to misspeak, trying to guesstimate, but we can pull that information and I will share it with Dr. Lewis to relay by the end of the day today, and that way you have that.
Yeah, that would be great. And I just want to say, because one of the things that we get as county commissioners, when we go out into the public, people ask us, well, why are so many of the costs for Durham Public Schools keep going up and up and up? And the enrollment is coming down. A lot of it is labor cost, the cost of hiring people, retaining people, making sure they're paid good wages, things of that nature, that we're trying to make sure we keep good people into the buildings. And so when people who work for the schools or people who work anywhere, they're not looking at these macroeconomic forces or what the state is doing. They're just looking at their paycheck and they don't understand why their pay is going up. So a lot of it is trying to keep people in the building, good people in the building. And they're doing work that matters, but it's not maybe necessarily right directly in the classroom. So I just wanted to say that because we get a lot of that, and I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you, Chair Upstead.
I'll start with the good news. Congratulations on all of the progress that has been made to put Durham Public Schools on a solid financial grounding. I mean, that is just critical because nothing can happen if Durham Public Schools is not budgetarily and fiscally, financially strong. So I want to congratulate you and to your team for what you've accomplished in a very short time.
Thank you.
You know, related to the audit and putting in a new ERP system, having a fund balance. These are huge achievements. So, I'm just going to follow up on a lot of the comments that I had before, that we have tough decisions to make. Obviously, what could be coming from Durham Public Schools, it's not fundable. And I know that there's a lot of demands on you all that have come out of the meet and confer process. But we also have to be realistic. And as you can see, it's just literally not possible. I guess one of my questions is the framework around meet and confer grounded in the information that was presented from the county? So, and is there a way going forward to ensure that the meet and confer process is grounded in that information and that knowledge? That's one of my questions. And how can we help with that? How can the county help provide that and ensure that?
I love that question. I think there's an opportunity for us. Obviously, this was our first year going through the meet and confer process. And I think as we reflect what additional educational opportunities for the entire meet and confer committee, in addition to the work that we're doing with the community around educating them. And so to answer your question, I think maybe some sessions with some county officials, with the meet and confer committee especially during the budget development process, I think will help. will be a good attempt to help folks understand the grim and current reality of where we are. That will also help temper some expectations.
Yeah, I think we need to educate everyone, the entire DPS community about, what we're all facing and what we're all going to have to get through together. I think it would also be really helpful for us to follow information about where are you all cutting costs? Because, we have to look at, and I know our county manager can talk about this, but we're also having to look internally around how we are cutting costs. Because where do we find the money for these things? One way is to reduce our expenditures. And for the county and Durham Public Schools, our biggest costs are related to personnel, as Commissioner Burton said. So, I mean, this is what we are going through internally, and what I would suggest that you all unfortunately have to look at as well, especially with declining enrollments and the money coming from the state that are associated with students. We absolutely need to increase the pay for our classified staff. I mean, that is a no-brainer. We have to figure out a plan how we do that. It may take us several years to phase it in, but again, one way to do that is to also find some money internally within your budget. One thing that does concern me is around the locally funded positions. And again, these are tough conversations, but I would like to better understand what are those locally funded positions, because those are expensive. 24% of the staffing being supported by local funds, that's a lot. And it's the same thing with our budget, is most of our budget is taken up by personnel, and we know the cost of benefits. So just want to throw that out there. The Chromebooks. Again, we have to think, I think we're gonna have to think outside the box if that is something that is really needed. I mean, I know some teachers are moving away from that because of, trying to get kids less dependent on things like AI, using AI to do their work, things like that. But if that is something that's determined, is there a way to work with the DPS Foundation, the chamber? Can we find other sources of funding for some of these things? We are not going to be able to, when we look at the spending that we have done over the last few years, we stepped in 2020, 24, 25 because there was a crisis that was not meant to be sustainable. So we're going to have to get creative to look at how we try to fund some of the things that we're doing. So I want to add a positive point, because Keith likes to be gloom and doom, which we appreciate. But I will tell you, on the county side, that when we look at our county compared to other counties, we are very fortunate. And the things that we are doing together, like our education to jobs pipeline with Durham Public Schools, Durham Tech, the private sector, like for the biowork certification for life sciences jobs with the Bulls, what we're doing with Duke, again, the pipeline for health sciences job, trade jobs. These are things we have to continue to stay focused on. And from our perspective, our board is going to continue to focus on these high-paying jobs. So I just want to put that out there. We're looking at ways to keep investing in our tax base. So we still have a bright future, but we're just going to have to get through some challenging times.
Vice Chair Alum.
Thank you, Chair Umstead. I want to say thank you, Mr. Teeter. Also want to echo comments made by Commissioner Jacobs. I'm really glad the work and effort y'all have been putting in to get the DPS in good, strong financial grounding, especially moving away from the lap salaries. A dependency is really, really significant. So thank you to you and your team for doing that work. I know we talked about this maybe like several years ago, but wanted to bring up the conversation again around when it comes to some of the salaried positions and to Board Member Chavez's question around when it comes to charter schools, especially the requirements that exist because of the state that we can't get around, but certain positions and roles that we have shifted to the county, like some of the nursing positions, if there are other avenues that we could look at that reduce the amount of resources that we have to put in to charters, because they can be positions that are housed under the county, that are still providing services like general services and maintenance positions, more of the nurses positions that there would be a strong MOU with DPS that would open up resources to provide the classified salary raises that we need. Wondering if that's something that we could explore more thoroughly as the budget seasons get tighter and tighter.
We can definitely explore all options, and we will talk about that in next year.
All right, appreciate that. I just want to close us out in this budget conversation with a couple of notes. I appreciate, we're kind of naming that doing school every year is going to get more expensive, even with declining enrollment, because salaries is the largest part of our budget. I think the other thing I want to note is that the funding is going to DPS and charter schools, right? Durham County funds Durham Public Schools, and it goes to Durham Public Schools and to the charter schools. So when we're having conversations about declining enrollment at DPS and increasing enrollment in charters, remembering the pot of money is going to all of those schools. And so I just think we talk about it a lot as like DPS and charters, but the money is going to all. So I think that's something for us to remember. And so even with less students, we're paying more for health insurance, retirement, utilities, salaries, and we should continue to do those different things. And as students leave our system, the money is following them, right? And we're paying for that through new money that's coming to, and about that 51 million and increasing as those students go. So your funding is going to all of those different places. Funding, I think about all of Durham children who are going to public entities in our system, we're funding that. So I just think that's an important note as we continue to have these conversations, that funding is going to all of those. I think y'all brought up a lot of really good questions around what we're doing with our funding, around locally funded positions. I think we can follow up with that. So many of those locally funded positions are, the state doesn't allot an assistant principal. So we're adding an assistant principal or a counselor, some of those roles that are really supporting our students. And so continue to think about how do we, we've been working on allotments, right? And how do we continue to get closer to the state allotment while not compromising what's happening in our school buildings every day. So appreciate this conversation. We've got more coming up. The work session this week, Durham Public Schools will be reviewing phase 2 of the superintendent's budget with a goal to finalize that budget at the end of March at our meeting, so we can send that over to you all. And we know we'll come over to y'all to have more conversations around the budget and hard questions. It's a grim time, but I think it's an important time for us to have these open and honest dialogue. Also want to appreciate Manager Hager and Mr. Lane, who came to Durham Public Schools meeting a couple weeks ago to present this. So we had that for the board as well as the community who was watching that meeting. So we can do more of that. Commissioner Burton.
Yeah, I just want to say, Chair Umstead, I'm glad you said about how DPS is funding positions that the state won't fund, but I also think that that needs to be fully fleshed out with our community to fully understand that, okay, at a school like, I'm just using Moorhead, may not get a full-time AP position, but DPS, because we know a full-time AP position is needed there, we fund that to make sure the support is needed for our kids. I think these things need to be, I know the issue around transparency, those things need to be explained fully around what the state funds and what we're doing as a community to fill in those gaps. So I just want to put that comment there.
Helpful. I'm gonna go to Ms. Byer and then I'm really gonna close this out. And Ms. Carter-Otten, because we have another item and we are way over time.
I think just as you all continue to wrestle with this on our behalf, particularly the living wage issue is going to be so critical for this community. You've already seen that the city is moving ahead of what you all can do for your own employees. But I think, and there is this gap that our folks are feeling, that you all are starting at 1922, and we are nowhere near that. And it takes years of advocacy on our folks' behalf to even approach that. I think y'all know that as y'all have given raises, maybe, did you say, Commissioner Burton, to me that 4% last year to your employees, our folks have been frozen, like the state has given nothing, and we've had to hold this massive group of classified folks steady. And so that's where a lot of that frustration is coming from our staff. They will be coming to you, and they come to you in the spirit of understanding the trend has been that the city has been able to take care of their folks. Y'all have mostly been able to take care of your employees with steady cost of living adjustments. And our folks have sat kind of frozen as we've tried to push for them. And so we are so appreciative of anything y'all can do on their behalf, even if it's a multi-year plan, because I think that's the frustration that our folks are feeling. Thanks.
Can I just add, though, we have to look at how that's being paid for on the city side. And last year, they had a very big tax increase. So again, that raises the question, is that also sustainable on the city side? Because the residents are paying for that, just for the city workers.
I don't want to take much more time, but and I know this is already in everybody's hearts and minds, but just a reminder that when you educate your population well, what you're doing is you're providing people with the skills and the abilities to go out in their community and get the jobs that they need to build a successful economy. You're making them healthier citizens that will rely on healthcare services less. You're making them less reliant on things like SNAP benefits and other social services. You're going to eventually reduce your jail population because you have people who are now in the workforce. So I really appreciate that you all continue to fund the education system at the level that you do. And just a reminder that that's, from my perspective, and I think most of us, the way that it should be. This is the foundation for a healthy society and a healthy economy in the long run, too. Also, for looking at why our families are choosing or not choosing Durham Public Schools, if their kids are sitting in classrooms with long-term subs or without the aid that they need for children with exceptional needs, or in classrooms that are over 80 degrees or at 55 degrees, these are real things that are happening in our schools. I don't think it's a surprise that they're choosing other schools, or if the bus can't come get their kids, right? So it's all the marketing and the communication about the amazing things we're doing, and it's providing safe learning environments that are what we really want for our children, that are going to build the society that we want, that's safe and sustainable for everybody. So I really appreciate the hard decisions that y'all are having to make. This is a dark, dire time, and just want to put this reminder into the space before we close this.
All right. That concludes the budget portion of our conversation. The next item we have is a pre-K enrollment update. I'm actually going to ask for both bodies if we can defer that update until our May joint meeting. We'll have more data and have a more complete and robust conversation, if that's okay with our bodies. I'm looking for information there. Ms. Carter-Otten.
I just have a request that we put that at the top of the agenda, if that's possible. That always gets put at the end and we always pass it. And so if we're thinking again about foundational things that get our kids ready for school and a good start, that is where we need to be spending our time as a joint body talking about pre-K.
We can do that. Dr. Chappelle, did you have anything that maybe you could email us as a preliminary update for today? All right, we can do that. Commissioner Jacobs.
Could we just reiterate some of the follow-up information that has been asked for? I have a list, but I don't know if you have one.
Dr. Lewis, do you all have a list? I took some notes too, but I don't.
Yeah, what I have is a list of what has been spent in the 2022 fund, how many employees are paid at that $17 an hour, and then how many in, what are some of those locally funded positions? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think there's a question around what cost-cutting measures is Durham Public Schools looking at?
And the other.
Locally.
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
Locally funded positions, what positions are locally funded?
Yeah, I said that one.
Okay, sorry, I apologize. Further conversation about shifting roles from Durham Public Schools to Durham County. That's a long-term, I think, goal. And I want to say, Commissioner Burton, you asked about what projects are shovel-ready.
Yeah, just figuring out how we can best utilize our money, like what's ready to go. So if we do a bond, we know what is ready to go. So money's not sitting.
Did I capture?
I have one more was just, I wanted to get more detailed information about the enrollment. Not just the capacity, because we had just seen capacity for all the schools.
Okay. All right, the next item on our agenda is Board of Education, Board of County Commissioners MOU. This MOU hasn't been reviewed for many years, and we need to take a stab at that process. I'm wondering if we could assign a couple folks, maybe the chairs can get together and assign a couple folks from both bodies to take a stab at reviewing that MOU so that we can have a draft at our May session. That feels okay. All right, I see some affirmation, so we'll do that so we can hopefully have a draft at the May session. The next item on our agenda is general public comment. Do not have any folks that have signed up. And so with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all for being here.